Thanks, guys, and thanks for the opportunity to tell the market a little bit about the Apollo story. We're a little bit unusual in that we found a million ounces in maiden resources just outside of Kalgoorlie in an area that was previously unmined and underexplored. And Kalgoorlie is a prolific district, but it's quite mature and it's quite hard to find completely fresh mineralizing systems. And because of that, you can see on the share price chart there on the screen, we've had a pretty good run up since our first discovery hole way back in 2017. Literally the first diamond hole we put into a target we'd had on the books for some time. It was something like 47 meters at 4 grams. It's some of the prettiest core I've ever seen, and we've been drilling to understand that structure and then finding additional structures ever since. And earlier this year, we got to the point where we had enough to deliver to the resource estimator, and he gave us a big number, and we gave that to the engineers, and they gave us some pit constrained ounces and reported just a touch over 1 million ounces at 1.2 grams as a first off. So it's been a good journey for us. Obviously, COVID set everyone on their heels a bit, but we've recovered strongly since then with the gold price and sentiment. Currently, we're about $100 million company. We've got $20 million in the bank, which is a nice place to be. And we've done a fair bit of that without being too dilutive. And that's by selling some of our leftover assets in Côte d'Ivoire. Very loyal shareholder base. Most of these guys are high net worth investors in retail. They've been with us since we're exploring in Africa, and obviously have stayed with us and contributed for the Australian discovery. Lake Rebecca, changed everything for us, and we've been divesting Côte d'Ivoire since, which has helped us. About 20% institutional at the minute, but we'll grow that because I think we're probably going to morph to a development story over the journey. I'm an explorer, been doing it for a long time. We're joined more recently by Tony James, who's a mine builder, a mining engineer out of Kalgoorlie, literally knows everyone. And he can, he's chomping at the bit to put the right people behind this and start talking to how we get ounces out of the ground. We've got an enterprise value of about 80 odd dollars for our resource ounces. We think it's actually a bit less than that, and I'll talk you through some of the hidden value in a later slide. If we can move on to the next one, please. Location-wise, it's a good spot. We're 150 kilometres from Kalgoorlie by road. It's a good road as well. It's actually the construction road for the Tropicana gold mine. So heavy haulage transport, easy get, it's about 2.5 hour drive. The location at the southern end of what's called the Laverton tectonic zone is a good spot as well. It's where mineralised structures to the north of us have, you can see there's more than 30 million ounces of endowment. We've got, added 1 million to that list, but way down in the southern end where the structures go into granite country, which is those white rocks. And so it makes it a bit unusual. It's a strange host rock, but that's the risk is the reward. It was underexplored and underdone, and I'll show you a bit more about that in the next slide. Now, what we did, like I said, we took a block model that was given to us by the resource geologist, gave it to the engineer. We only talk about ounces that fell inside pit shells at Australian $2,250 an ounce. And you can go to and forth on what's the correct gold price to use on this sort of work. But since we did the study, Aussie gold's up is $550 higher than that number that we use. So it's become conservative. But it's a number. But what's important is we don't talk about ounces that didn't fall inside those commercial shells. So we use standard mining costs, and the engineers told us what's mineable. So they're literally chomping the bit to start mining. The reason we didn't is we saw that in a lot of places that I demonstrate that the drilling, the pits dug to the basin information, which means it can get bigger, and we need to continue on with the drill work for this calendar year. 3 deposits, but the big breakthrough for us was finding the Rebecca deposit. And you can see that in the north of the tenement block there. Now that's under soil cover. It's got about 10 to 20 metres of transported profile on it. That kept it hidden. There was no real evidence that there was anything there prior to us. We did know about the Duke and Duchess gold systems to the south because they stuck out through soil cover and were found back in the 90s. But we followed the breadcrumbs north really, and we're lucky enough to find something that was firstly a lot bigger and also better. It's got a much better grade profile than what was known about previously. And I'll talk to that in the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So this is those grey shapes you're looking at there. They're long section views of the deposit. The engineers want to dig a big hole. It's 1.7 kilometres length. It's half a kilometre wide. It's 300 metres deep. It's a pretty serious body of rock, and the reason it digs that much and that deep is because there's a lot of grade hidden inside that grey pit shell. And you can see in the bottom long section where, firstly you see a couple of things. There's areas where there's very little information below the pit because it dug to the last knowledge point. And you can see that where there is knowledge, there's blocks that go beyond the pit. So this is where we've been working with the rigs this year. Because of the grade inside the high grade structures, we did quite a bit of drilling in the lead up to the resources, and we've got over 500,000 of those ounces in indicated status. So they're high confidence ounces from the get-go. They're inside a shell. So it's coming along nicely. I want to really delve into what we've done since the resource work in February. So flip to the next slide, please. It's a really strange bit of geology. It's quite complicated, but what we've got is a series of structures that fold around themselves, and they're almost like sheaths on a it's like baseball mitt shapes, and there's multiple surfaces. What that does for us is it gives us in cross-section view multiple structures on the same section. And when you look at the block model, which is those colourful shapes there, against the edge of the pit shell, you can see that we're not talking about ridiculous ore to waste ratios, so it looks eminently open pittable, and we don't talk to strip ratios in the work we've done so far, but the numbers that we're seeing are a very stock standard goldfields open pit, so it's not a high strip system. And the reason that is because we get to see multiple structures in the same section, and we also get some low grade hanging wall and footwall material that adds volume. So next slide, please. This is just an animation. I'll spin it around just to show you back in February what we were dealing with. We only talk to the colours that sit inside the grey shell. Anything you see external to it, we don't report. And you can also see that the gaps in the knowledge base below that rotating model. So that's where we have been focusing our attention with the deeper drilling this year. And we've also been filling in some of the gaps at the north end and the south end and some of the saddle zones in the middle of these pits. So that's probably enough of that. You can click to the next slide, please. Now, firstly, on the diamond drilling at depth, we've had a diamond rig out there for most of this year. It's out there at present. We're putting pretty significant step down exploration holes below the system. There's 2 sections and 2 intercepts. They're 100 odd metres down dip from the last point of information, and you can see that we're getting grade and width in both of those, and that's a common theme. What it's telling us is the 700,000 ounces in a pit. There's also going to be a continuing storing as we go downwards below it, and I see great potential to add underground ounces here at a later point in the mine history. Next slide, please. This is as of today. These are pierce points in yellow that we've added since the resource work. You can see those strings that sit outside that grey shape. With diamond drilling, we're almost 100% success rate, drilling intercepts below the central part of that main pit. And then the intercepts that are in those yellow circles, that's RC drilling that's much closer to surface, and that will change the shape of the pit in the next resource work that we do. The sum of all of this is we're hopeful that we can build the scale of the Rebecca pit itself, either by deeper or laterally, and also we will increase the confidence of some of that remaining inferred ounces. Just as, in terms of scale, you forget how big this thing is. That's a 300-metre scale bar at the bottom. You can see that you know, in a typical underground mining environment, that's about the strike of the long section that you'll be seeing. And so we're sort of dealing internal to the best part of the system with geometries that look like they can be mined later on as an underground setting. Next slide, please. The other way we can make it bigger is by pushing on to the other two deposits, the Duke and Duchess, which are to the south. They are much lower grade. They're really only 1 gram systems, but they've got just the same geometry. They're typically 15-metre wide mineralised structures. They've got, especially at Duchess, a strip ratio that appears to be very manageable. And we know that they're open-ended, and there's just a limited amount of information in terms of drill density for both of those. So the rig's down at Duchess at the minute. This is the RC rig doing infill and extensional work. And it's also, and this is really exciting stuff, pushing further northwards along that structural corridor between Duchess and Rebecca. And you can see 3 stars that just emerged there and some intercepts that we'll be drilling. And these are literally reconnaissance RC traverses through transported profile. And we're identifying multiple areas that have got good grade and good geometry. And each one of these can provide us additional ounces. So the way we see this emerging over the journey is probably heading towards the million ounces of indicated ideally, and you can start talking to 10 years of approximately 100,000 ounces per annum mine life. It's a granite host rock, some photos of the core there. It's lovely ground conditions. It's very competent. The mineralisation is actually disseminated sulfides, not a quartz vein. The metallurgy on sulfides looks pretty good. So we're above the north of 90% in the work we've done so far. There's some free gold around. That's always a good sign. So there needs to be some gravity work and see how much comes out of that. Next slide, please. Now the hidden values. So this is the last of the remaining assets in Africa. Africa's been pretty good for us. We have got a royalty holding over the Segala gold project. There's more than 1 million ounces that are in resources there. It's owned by a TSX company called Roxgold. 1 million ounces, well into the 2 grams. It will be a mine. They're pushing on very hard with this thing, and they think they're going to decide to mine it at some stage in the coming year. We can either ride the journey with them on this, or we can liquidate that, but we do know from the strength of the offers we're getting that it's worth a lot of money. So we've got something else that can add to that 20 million cash balance. Next slide, please. So that's our story, guys. Thanks for listening. It's one of the few, arguably, next generation open pit discoveries in WA. We only report ounces that fall inside pits, so that we believe they're real and mineable. We know it can get bigger because the drill rigs are telling this. We've got a metric against our peers that looks okay, and we know they've got plenty of funding in the bank and also up our sleeve in that royalty. So there'll be a lot of news flow over the next 6 months or so as we work towards our next resource statement. And then I think the story is probably going to be pushing on towards the development of this system. So it's getting a lot of support from the technical side. We We run a pretty small and lean operation, but we're always happy to talk to new shareholders and answer any questions. So please forward any questions you may have. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Nick. We have a couple of questions. I've actually been out to Kalgoorlie. I'm surprised you could find such a great maiden discovery so close to Kalgoorlie. Can you tell us about how the acquisition came about?
Yeah, like the Duke and Duchess systems were present in 1990s exploration by a group called Aberfoyle. They knew there was gold there. They hadn't done the density of work to understand its geometry. So we picked it up quite cheaply off a junior. And I went there because of the unusual host rock and the disseminated sulfide. But it didn't look like a mine at that time because it was, it was 0.5 gram to 1.5 grams. But the idea was that somewhere out there undercover there might be something better, and that's what we've been lucky enough to find. The Aberfoyle guys were only probably 20 or 30 RC holes away from finding it themselves.
And is the plan to use the cash to drill deeper? I mean, you've got some good grades there at shallow lengths. Are you going to drill deeper? We're
drilling deeper today. So we've got an RC rig doing the shallow stuff, and the diamond rig's putting in pierce points deeper below those grey pit shell shapes. So we're doing both. The quick value add is definitely RC drilling into near surface ore positions, and add to that, what might be the mine life story that we'll be talking about in the next bottom half of this year and into next year.
Right, and just one last question. What's the time frame to development?
Well, there's lots of long lead times items such as environmental and MET and things like that. So we're putting our mind to that now, and we're doing that in the background. So, if we can tick off some of the early stage approvals process and get granted mining license, et cetera, then this thing can be developed, in the next 18 to 24 months. So that's, something that we're increasingly putting our mind to.